Hey, Catalyst Women. I am Danielle Wingate, one of the founders, and I am so excited to be joining you today for our first live interview. Today, I am honored to be joined by a great friend, mentor, Jenni Catron. She is a runner extraordinaire, and she is a boss in the business field, and she is the founder of an exciting organization called Get Foresight, leadership consulting. But today she is going to be answering questions about her journey as a Catalyst woman and what some of those decisions and just all that entire journey looks like. So Jenni, thank you for joining us today. And I'm just going to kind of turn it over to you as I ask questions. So
Awesome.
Tell me a little bit about you, like growing up and what that looked like.
Yeah. Well, Danielle, it's so fun to be a part of this. I love what you guys are doing with Catalyst Women. So fun to be with you all and just talk about, our stories and our journey and what God is doing in our lives. And so for me, I am a Midwest girl, born and raised in a small town in rural northern Wisconsin. So, I mean,
You hear that at all in your accent?
Not at all, right? And I think it's coming back because we just relocated back to Wisconsin, and there will be certain sounds I'm like, oh, I sound really northern again, So I grew up in the Midwest, small, a blue collar family. Neither of my parents went to college, great people, just kind of salt of the earth, small town people. But I had a big city girl heart. And so, I was that kid that, had dreams and aspirations, and I don't really know where they came from because most of my family stayed in the area. Just a few of us went off to college, but I was a kid who just dreamed big dreams. So, grew up in a small town. My parents divorced when I was 5. So that, was kind of significant for us, and that, that kind of rearranged family dynamics. I have one younger sister and a younger stepsister. So I'm kind of the oldest of 3 girls, and love being the bossy big sister, of course.
That's so fun. Are there elements and just even memories maybe from your parents' divorce and your childhood that you really feel like from a young age started planting things, whether in your mind or your heart, that really started defining kind of your journey and the steps to even lead you where you are today?
Yeah. And I know a lot of folks, divorced families are, more common than I think any of us hope for them to be. But I think that, my parents' dynamic was a little interesting. Mom was 17 and dad was 20 when I was born. And so they were kind of ushered into a quick marriage because mom was pregnant. And so everything kind of started a little rocky, it's just the dynamics of that. And so that they divorced was not a big surprise. But mom was, 22 with 2 kids. And so, that was I just cannot imagine. I can't imagine that world.
Yeah, me neither.
I don't have any children, and I'm like, I watch my sister's kids and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all the moms out there. You guys are
I have a toddler, and God bless people with multiples.
Right.
Do.
Yeah. And you've got a few more years of, experience and life under your belt than my 22-year-old mom did, so it was, things were challenging. She had a lot to navigate. We spent a lot of time with my grandparents. And it was kind of like everybody just was figuring out how to survive. And I think that was a lot of what shaped me in that era. I was 5 years old, and I quickly learned to be really independent. And some of that is nature of a firstborn. But I think the circumstances of our family dynamics really, it for good and for bad, because it has both a good and a bad side. I really developed this, well, if it's going to get done, I got to figure it out. So even as a really small kid, I kind of fended for myself and said, you know what, if I want something to happen, I've got to figure out how to make it happen. And a lot of that has served me well to accomplish some great stuff. And then on the flip side of that, it's also made me so hyper independent that developing great relationships and developing trusting relationships. And, my husband, we've been married over 17 years, and he'll still say, Jen, you don't ask for help. And I'm like, well, asking for help is really foreign to me, and it's still stretching after all these years. So it produced good and bad, but I would say that's one of probably the biggest things that my parents' early divorce formed in me.
No, that's really good. It's really interesting because even sometimes I find myself not wanting to ask for help because I feel like it's almost waving the white flag of weakness or surrender that I can't.
Yeah.
And that's just, especially in today's world, like you're like, hey, you can't be weak. Like you have to have it all together. And that's such the lie I feel like from the enemy sometimes
Yeah.
because as women, like we need other women in our corner. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
God created us with different strengths. So absolutely.
Yeah.
What did you end up doing after high school? How did you figure out what to do in like now that season? You're shaking your head. I feel like there's already
There's a story. It's crazy. I mean, I laugh and I'm like, it's an only God thing for me, because like I told you, my parents didn't go to college, so they didn't really know how to direct me towards that. And by this point, my mom had become a Christian. And so, we were one of those families where you could only listen to Christian music and you could only read Christian books, and you could, like kind of got like sucked into the Christian bubble. And, and I say that with both again, it has a good and a bad side to it, right? But it was mostly good. But I'd always loved music, and I kind of fell in love with this idea of going to Nashville, Tennessee and working at a Christian record company, because although I loved music, I realized I think I just had this good instinct as a kid to go, I did some singing and I had piano lessons and stuff, but it was really more hobby. It wasn't going to be a profession. Like, I think I was smart enough to go, I don't think you're good enough to like make this your career. But I discovered that there must be a whole world of business that helps make this happen. And I remember looking on the back of a CD cover and seeing a company called Forefront Records. And I thought, there must be people who work in an office that help make this happen. And again, I worked in a blue collar community. Like, there was no context for me to understand the music business. And yet I was kind of piecing all this stuff together, which I think is some of just that innate God-given gift of leadership and administration and business mind that was in me. And so I think I was 13 years old and I said, I want to work for Forefront Records.
Wow.
And I mean, I just declared it. And my family thought I was absolutely crazy, but they kind of just let me like pursue it, even though I think they thought it would never happen. But I started looking at colleges in Tennessee because I thought, well, I at least want to be in the vicinity. And I started looking at every Christian college that was in the Nashville or the Tennessee area. And I ended up going to a small school outside of Chattanooga for 2 years. Got an internship at Forefront because it was like after my sophomore year, it was time to do an internship for credit towards my degree. And and this was back in the day before email. So I'm writing letters into these record companies asking for, can I come and intern for you? I mean, it's crazy. And I got a letter back from the girl in the radio promotions department at Forefront. And she said, can you come now? And I said, well, I have to go home for the summer to work to pay for it so I can come in the fall. So the fall of my junior year, I moved to Nashville. I moved with everything that could fit in my 1992 Saturn 4-door car. I mean, I packed that thing to the gills. It was there was only space for me to sit, and then all of my possessions were in this car. I moved to Nashville without a place to live. So I had like a few connections of people who said, well, I might know somebody who needs a roommate, and I had somebody who would let me stay with them for a week. So I moved to Nashville. I had a girl that allowed me to stay with her for a week. And during the course of that week, I had to find a permanent place to live. So, I mean, I look back on that and I'm like, and I remember my dad being terrified. Like, he was helping me load up this Saturn and he's going, but Jen, you don't have a place to live yet. Jen, like, where are you going to live? And I'm like, Dad, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'll figure it out. And, my poor dad, I don't know how he didn't have like a heart attack, but
I don't think Chris would let Emma go. Like,
I know, right? Yeah. I look back at it and it's absolutely insane, but it was like, I so distinctly had this vision for what I wanted to do. And I was so like committed to figuring it out. So I did. I got the internship at Forefront. 2 weeks later, I got a part-time job. So I interned and I worked part-time there. And eventually, within a couple months, they hired me full-time. And I was exactly where I had always hoped to be. And it's just crazy. I mean, it's such a crazy story.
So, okay. And so I want to just spend another minute there. So at what point did you actually meet your amazing husband, Marilyn?
Yes, we met at college. So when I was at the school outside of Chattanooga, we met, we weren't dating when I moved to Nashville, but the irony of the story is that he was the person who drove me to Nashville for the interview for my internship. So we were like interested in each other, but we were playing that play it cool, no, who's gonna express their interest in first. And so I didn't have a car at the time. So I was looking for people who would take me to Nashville for this interview. And he offered. So that was like probably one of our first dates, was him going to Nashville with me and sitting in the interview for my internship, which is so crazy. And then we started dating like really later that year or something. So we met there, but then I lived in Nashville and he lived over in the Chattanooga area. So we long distance dated for like 3 years. It's craziness.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So now that we know that, so how did you get from really Forefront Records into full-time ministry, and then even like Foresight? Like, walk me kind of through that professional journey.
Yeah. So that was a whole kind of journey in and of itself, because, as a 13-year-old kid, I said I wanted to work in the music business. I thought that I would run a record company someday. I mean, that was the ultimate goal. Oh, yeah. And I was climbing that ladder like a champ, so I was, by the time I was 28, so I'd been working there for 8 years. By the time I was 28, I was a seat away from the executive suite, so I had really, I had proven myself. I had kind of, just climbed the ladder, learned a ton, traveled the world, so, I mean, I just was having amazing experiences. And, there was a big corporate merger, and I survived it. I had a good seat on the bus. I didn't love it. I wasn't thrilled with the culture. When you mash two organizations together, you kind of end up usually with a cultural mess. And so there's a lot to work on to kind of sort that out. And so I wasn't loving it. And I think that was one of those catalytic moments where God was kind of just softening my heart to something else. I'd had this huge dream, and I think God put the music business dream in my heart to help me expand my horizons and ultimately kind of get to some of the other places he's taken me. It's always fascinating to see sometimes, I think, how God will use the dreams that you have to actually help accomplish his purpose. It's like he allows you to follow your dream only to help kind of lead you to something greater that he has in mind. And it was completely that for me. So I was working in the music business, a little unsettled. My husband and I had just started attending a new church plant in Nashville, a church called Crosspoint, which is where you and I met. And we were just faithful volunteers, loving every minute of it. And around that time that I was in the unsettled state at the record company, the pastor of the church just said to me, "Hey, if you ever leave the music business, come and talk to me, because I really need your help here at this church." And I thought, what am I going to do on a church staff? I'm a business major. I've been working in the music business. This is crazy. I'm a music business girl. I'm a marketing girl. I'm a strategy girl. I'm a branding girl. That's what I do. But I was restless enough, and I was actually interviewing with some other organizations, and I couldn't we loved the church. We loved what was happening there. And I couldn't shake that invitation to come and work there. So, I had some more conversations, pursued it some more. And I can really distinctly remember a Sunday morning, I was volunteering. We were still meeting in a school cafeteria. So we were not in a fancy building. It was kind of an unknown church in the Nashville area. And I was in the back of the room helping direct the services that day. And I was watching the pastor speak. And I just felt like God say, "I need you to do for this church and for this vision what you've been doing for artists." And when I was working in the music business, I was a brand manager and artist development director, which means that I would work with the artist and their manager and kind of try to capture their vision for what that artist wanted to do and who they wanted to reach. And then I would work with the rest of the record company to figure out how to visually demonstrate that, how to make sure the right radio single got to market. I oversaw all the marketing to make sure the marketing was matching the vision. And that was the aha moment for me, is that I felt like God saying, "I need you to bring the same set of skills to this church and help this church live out the vision that I have for it." And that was the moment. I just knew. I was like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I went on staff at Crosspoint, was there for over 9 years. And as you know, because you were part of that team and that journey, we went from we were meeting in a school cafeteria with about 500 attendees. And when I left 9 years later, we were over 6,000 attendees at 5 or 6 locations. You know, we went from 5 staff when I started to over 60 or 70 staff when I left. And I mean, absolutely one of the greatest journeys of my life, being able to be a part of a vision and a mission and work with a team to accomplish that, which really became the driving motivation for me. The thing that I kind of learned through all of that journey was that at the core of who I am is I have this passion for leadership and I have this passion for developing people. And I love figuring out how to take the vision and mission of an organization and guide a team of people to use their gifts to help accomplish that. It's like when I can, like, I always think it's like just this beautiful collision of when the gifts of individuals can actually align to help make a vision happen. And that's when you see just amazing things happen. Yes. And so that's what I did there. And then from that, I actually went to California, worked at a church there for a couple of years, and then launched the Foresight Group, which, you know, we're working with churches, nonprofits, some businesses, doing that very thing of trying to help align their team and the gifts of their team with the mission vision of the organization. I say it's where strategy and culture collide, right? Mm-hmm. That, you know, we have these strategic vision and plans that we want to make happen, but we've got to nurture a culture of people to help make that happen. And so I feel like that's where I sit best, is at that intersection of both. So that's what I spend my days doing.
That's so awesome. So now that we have the big picture of the professional journey, I want to kind of journey back to the personal side. So I know, just as with everybody, there's seasons in life that feel like valleys, that you have to navigate through, just tough seasons that sometimes you have to just choose joy because there doesn't seem to be a lot of joy and clarity in that moment. Yeah. Do you have any of those seasons that you would just be willing to kind of share with us, that you've had to kind of navigate through to choose well, to just be faithful in that calling that you feel like God's given you?
Yeah, no, that's so good, Danielle. And I think, you know, there's probably a few. I'll try to pick out a couple of them. Thinking of where to start. A really quick one was when I was in high school, my family went through a really challenging church situation where, you know, there was a lot going on with the church. It was really unhealthy in a lot of ways. And I really began to second guess faith and Christians and, you know, just all of that, which, you know, typically you're going to do in high school anyway, because you're figuring your life out, you know, and that was about the time that I was about to leave for a Christian college and try to work in the Christian music business. And, you know, and so there was a journey there of just kind of going, okay, but do I believe that God is true? And do I believe that God is faithful? And I think that I just kept clinging to that, even though I didn't know, it didn't feel right at times because of what I was seeing happen with some of the Christians that were kind of in and around our world. And so there's a little bit there. I remember that just being a really lonely season in a lot of ways, that I was trying to figure out my faith, and I couldn't lean on my parents. I couldn't lean on my church leaders. I had to kind of figure out my faith for myself. So that was a really significant faith moment for me. Professionally, when I think I was 21 or 22, and I was I was a couple years into my work in the music business, and I just had kind of a terrible management experience. I had my first employee who worked for me, and I botched it. I mean, I just, you know, I'm a pretty driven person by nature, and so I went into this relationship with this new staff person, and I'm just barking orders and, like, you know, being the boss. And it totally backfired. You know, this staff person was miserable. I was miserable. I thought it wasn't going to work. I thought it was all him. He thought it was all me. I went to my boss and he was like, Jenny, if you want to work with widgets, go work in a factory. But if you want to work with people, you're going to have to learn how to love them and how to lead them. And really, Danielle, that was like that moment. I mean, you know me as somebody who's passionate about leadership development. Yeah. But that was the moment that really, like, you know, made that distinct for me, in that, wow, you know, this whole deal of climbing the ladder and achieving my dreams can't be at the expense of others, you know, and that it really distilled in me, like that moment really distilled for me the importance of leadership and the importance of the influence that we have on other people, especially when we're in a position of power or leadership, And so here I was, the manager, young manager, but I had, this responsibility, and I had this, opportunity, and I was not stewarding it well. And I was, not only making myself miserable, but I was really making the employee who worked with me miserable. And I didn't want to be that kind of boss. I didn't want to be that kind of leader. And it really just challenged me to recognize I had a lot of growing to do. And up until that point, I kind of felt like I was on top of the world. I was chasing all the dreams, and it was all happening, and it was all working. And it was a good sucker punch for me to recognize that, I needed that little dose of humility to realize there was some growth that needed to happen. And so that was a big one for me. And that was a slow journey, and those of you who, have that value of developing others and working with others, you realize that you can't microwave it. You can't force people to grow. You can't force yourself to grow. It's like you have to posture yourself and position yourself in ways that open you to growth and, learning, and whether it's mentors and reading or resources or however you see growth kind of happen in your life. But it's a process, and you can't fix it overnight. And for somebody like myself, who's so driven and can kind of, force my way into whatever I want, make it happen kind of girl. When it comes to personal development, that's a much slower journey. And that season in particular really taught me that. And it was foundational for everything I do now.
That's so good. I actually have thought of that story often, because I remember you telling me when I was, a younger leader, just starting in ministry, you were one of the first leaders, female leaders especially, that poured into me in the ministry world. And I remember that very conversation of you telling me that story, and I so appreciated just your honesty and that perspective, because for you, I know, like you said, it was a process, but even for me, in taking my strengths and my personality, I've also had to navigate that, but keeping in mind those experiences that you had, to know this isn't going to be solved overnight. But if I can show up today, choose to love the person that I have been entrusted with on my team, and if I can, choose to help steward their strengths, help not challenge, but I guess kind of help refine those opportunities, I'm going to help make them better, which is the win. They're going to help make the team better. And so it just really helped challenge the way that I thought about, how do I look at this picture differently? So anyway, I love that story. Like, it's been so helpful to take that tool and add it to my own toolbox.
That's awesome.
So in those seasons of kind of adjusting and, like the non-microwave seasons that you have to just kind of journey through, that you're like, well, I don't see a result today, but I have to keep showing up tomorrow and still trying. How do you choose joy? Like, what are things that have really brought you relief, encouragement, and not even happiness, because I know happiness is a choice, but what helps you just kind of journey through those tough seasons to get to, I realized that season had this purpose in life?
It's such a great question. And, one of the seasons that I didn't mention in the previous question, but was very recent, when I left Nashville and I went to the San Francisco area for a couple of years to work in a church there. It ended up not being what I expected it to be. Wonderful church, great people, but it was not the fit that I had hoped for. And so I thought it was like another ladder climbing opportunity, and that driven part of me doesn't go away. Hopefully it's being refined, right? But I got there and it wasn't what I hoped. And then we were, over 2,000 miles away from family, friends, community. And so it was a very lonely season. And I remember I just kept trying to run through it. I was like, if I can just, and I would actually have these conversations with God saying, God, just show me what I need to learn in this season. And then I will learn it really fast. And then, let's move on. And I feel like, part of that, it was about a 3-month or 3-year journey. And part of that was what he was teaching me in those moments. And I think that's what I'm continuing to come back to, is that being more patient in seasons and recognizing that everything's a season. The good seasons are here for a time. The bad seasons are here for a time. And there's always something we're learning in both of them, and to learn to just value them and see what they're producing. One of the things that in that season in California, for a while I was just frustrated because, we downsized and we were living in this small little place because the Bay Area is so astronomically expensive. And, we didn't have a circle of community around us. And I love creating a wonderful home and a space where people can come and like hang out and be a part. And we just couldn't do that because of where we were. And then I thought, you know what? My life is really simple right now. I don't have to spend hours cleaning a house. I don't have to spend I don't have a ton of things vying for my attention. And there was just a moment where I recognized, you know what, I think the purpose of this season really actually was, it was just a sweet season for my husband and I. Like it kind of like brought us closer together, and that it was just us, And so I learned to value, there was something different that God was teaching me to value. And I think that's the key, is in those seasons, there's probably something different that you need to value or you need to emphasize, even though you might feel a loss of something else. There's purpose in it. And I think you have to really hunt for the purpose. Now, really tactically, one of the things that I've done in those types of seasons is I will get up every morning and I will write a what's good list, and so I will, have a journal out, and I will force myself to think of 3 to 5 things that are good. Even if this season is not what I hoped for, is not what I expected, is hard in a number of ways, where do I still see God's blessing? What's good? Because there's something good. And even that framing, that perspective, and choosing that perspective every morning completely shifted it. And I'd like to say I actually did it every morning. I didn't do it every morning, but when I would do it, it would help me kind of frame my thoughts and have healthy perspective on those seasons. And so that's something just really practical that was helpful for me, and that I had to choose to think about, because the reality is we're so blessed in so many ways. And even in our hardest seasons, sometimes that's where we see some of the most beautiful fruit of what God is doing in our lives and our stories. So that was a thing for me. I just put my what's good list. What's good? Because there's something good. I've just got to hunt for it.
There always is, for sure. Well, just as we're closing up, I just want to give you the opportunity to share from your heart, now that we've heard a little bit of your story, just if there's anything that you would love to say to any woman joining on, regardless of the season and journey that they're in, the journey that they're on. I mean, just if there's anything you'd like to say in closing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just love that you guys are engaged and connecting. And I think, just the resources of Catalyst Women is such a gift. Because I think we're all on a journey, and sometimes it feels really lonely, and we feel, like nobody else understands or can relate to what we're going through. And while each one of our journeys and stories have uniqueness, it's amazing how much we actually share in common. And so I think what I would encourage is fight for places that pour into your heart and pour into your soul, the people who do that, the resources like Catalyst Women that do that. And because the danger is sometimes when we're in more challenging season, or even sometimes in thriving seasons, we can neglect the things that actually fill us up and fuel us. We can retreat, or we can just get distracted, and we can miss the value of the people in our lives. And so I would just encourage you guys with that, that our greatest opportunities for influence are with the people right around us every day. It's with your family, it's with your friends, it's with your neighbors, it's with your community, it's with your dear friendships. And there's a ton of amazing things that we can do, but at the end of the day, it's going to come back to the people closest to you and the influence that you have in their life and the influence that they have in yours. And so just fighting for that, making that a value, making that just part of who you are and what you value, because you'll get to do some amazing things, and that'll be the overflow. But it all comes back to the significance of those relationships, and having that in those seasons of thriving and in those lean seasons. Those are the things that are going to be consistent and with you all the way. So,
Well, thank you so much for just taking time out of your day and sharing a little bit of your journey. I just am so thankful. And thank you guys for joining in, and I can't wait to share with you what's coming up next. Hope you have a great day, and remember to keep choosing to be a Catalyst Woman. Thanks.